You have a list of AI use cases, maybe 30, maybe 50, maybe 100. At some point, someone has to decide which one to build first. Most organizations do this with a priority workshop. Business values, strategic fit, stakeholder votes. They pick the top 3 and hand them to the AI team. And then they come back and say, we can't build this. The data infrastructure doesn't support it. This video is about a different approach. One that starts with your infrastructure, maps it against what your use cases actually need, and tells you, before you commit anything, exactly where you can start and what you need to fix first. By the end of this video, you will have a method, 8 dimensions to score, a gap analysis to run, and a clear way to select your first use case. Let's get into it. Now, before I walk you through the assessment, I need to make one thing clear, because it explains why this is necessary at all. Data that works for human analysts does not automatically work for an AI agent. And the gap between those two things is exactly what most feasibility reviews miss. An analyst can look at a field with 3 different naming conventions across source systems and figure out what it means. An AI agent cannot. An analyst can flag an anomaly and ask a colleague for help. An AI agent either handles it in code or fails silently. An analyst does not need to prove 6 months later and in front of a regulator exactly what version of a business definition they were working with at 9 a.m. on a specific Tuesday. An AI agent does need to prove all of that, which means the infrastructure it depends on needs to be built on a different standard altogether. That standard is what the 8-dimension assessment measures. Let's go through it. This assessment covers 8 dimensions across 2 groups. I will go through all 8 and tell you what each one measures and what it looks like at each maturity level. The scale of maturity is 1 to 4. If you're at level 1, your data infrastructure is built for human analysts. If you're at level 2, you have some of the right building blocks in place, but it needs work. If you're at level 3, you are ready for a production agent. And if you're in level 4, you can onboard fully autonomous, self-healing, purpose-built AI agents. Your job is to score your organization across all 8, not where you aspire to be, but where you actually are today. So I was talking about 2 groups for these 8 dimensions, right? So group 1 is data infrastructure. There are 4 dimensions in it. The first one is consumers. Who was this data built for? If the answer is BI dashboards, analyst reports, that is level 1. If it is structured APIs designed for machine consumption, you are closer to level 3. The question is, can a system consume this without a human interpreting it first? Second dimension is data access. How quickly can an agent retrieve what it needs? Overnight batch jobs, you are at level 1. Real-time streaming APIs with sub-second response are level 3. I'll tell you honestly, this dimension trips up most organizations because they believe they have got real-time data until you define real-time as 200 milliseconds and the answer completely changes. Third is schema rigor. Is the structure of your data consistent and enforced? Ad hoc schemas with field names that vary across source systems are level 1. Strict contracts with enforcement and version control are level 3. An agent cannot reconcile inconsistent schemas the way a human can. It needs to know what it will always receive. Fourth, metadata. Does your data carry enough context for a system to understand what it means without human explaining it? Minimal documentation, you are at level 1. Versioned definitions with effective date ranges, name stewards, and approval records, you are at level 3. This is the one that most organizations underestimate. A data catalog is not the same as governed metadata. I have written about this separately. I'll put the link in the description. You can read the blog. Now remember, I'm not talking about level 4 here because level 4 is aspirational. I don't think most organizations are at level 4 today. Now, let's come to group 2. Group 2 is AI operational readiness. We talk about 4 dimensions here. The first one is error handling. When a data source fails or returns unexpected results, what happens? If the answer is that someone gets a call at 2 a.m. and fixes it manually, that is level 1. If the system detects failure, handles it gracefully, without or some minimum human intervention, that is level 3. Silent failure in a production agent is not a technical inconvenience, it's a compliance event. So you need to be careful. The second dimension in group 2, or the sixth dimension altogether, is memory and state. Can the agent maintain context across multiple steps in a workflow, or does every call start from scratch? Stateless is level 1. Persistent context across a full interaction, auditable and retrievable, is level 3. Most use cases that actually require agents need this because they are doing something that takes multiple steps, not a single query. The next one is evaluation. Can you measure whether your agent is performing correctly over time? Not just at launch, over time, in an ongoing basis. The complication here is that a performance score is only meaningful if you know what context the agent was operating against when it was produced. If your business definitions change between eval runs, your evaluation pipeline does not know. You are not measuring the same thing twice. And I call this context drift. Again, there's a longer piece on this that I have linked below in the description. You can read the article. The next dimension is observability. Can you reconstruct what your agent did, why it did, and what data it was operating against at any point after the fact? Standard pipeline monitoring tells you what happens. Observability in an agent context means you can show the conditions under which it happened, which definitions were in force, which policy versions were active, which data sources had been certified. Without that, you cannot defend the decision to a regulator. And with this, you can definitely do it. Once you have scored all of these 8 dimensions across 2 groups, the next step is to map your candidate use cases against what they actually require. Every use case has a different infrastructure profile. A loan modification agent, where an AI handles the full negotiation and updates the loan system without a human case worker, needs level 3 on data access, schema rigor, metadata, memory and state management, and observability. That is 5 dimensions at level 3. A simpler use case, say transaction classification, where you are tagging and enriching records but not making autonomous decisions, might only need level 2 on most dimensions. Much smaller infrastructure requirement, much faster path to production. Now you see how the prioritization is decided. So when you plot all your candidate use cases against the dimension scores you just produced, you get a map. Each cell shows whether your current score meets the requirement, whether it's close or whether it's a blocker. The heat map tells you 2 things at once. Which use cases are within reach now and which dimensions are causing the most damage across your whole portfolio. The second question, which dimension is blocking the most use cases? This is how you identify your highest leverage investment. It is almost always about one of the 2 things: data access, because most enterprise pipelines were built for overnight batch and agents need real time in most use cases. Or it could be around schema rigor, because data that is good enough for an analyst to interpret is often not consistent enough for an AI agent to act on without error. So most organizations today do not have strict schema rigor that an AI agent would need. Now you can run your own numbers, count how many use cases have each dimension as their primary blocker. The dimension with the highest count is where you focus your infrastructure investment. Fix that one thing and most use cases move from blocked to possible. Okay, now let's talk about where these required scores come from. How do we benchmark what score is ideal for each use case, for each dimension? How do I know that a loan modification agent needs level 3 on schema rigor and not a level 2? I want to be direct about this. These thresholds are not derived from any controlled study. This is a field that is too young for that. They come from triangulating 3 sources. First, postmortems. When agent deployments fail to reach production, what was the actual infrastructure blocker? You don't need to look into the official reason. You need to find the real one, like real blocker that caused this agent to fail. Across everything I have seen, it is almost always data access latency, schema inconsistency, or missing observability. Second, in the triangle, you look into production success patterns. Look at the agents that are actually running today. What infrastructure conditions were present? Work backwards from that. Work backwards from what was successful. Third is physics in general. Some thresholds are not opinions, they are operational constraint. Think about a real-time fraud agent, which has a decision window of 200 milliseconds or less. If your pipeline cannot meet that, the use case does not work regardless of your model. This is not a maturity judgment, this is just physics. Now, these are working thresholds, right? They improve with every deployment. You use them as starting baseline and define them against your own evidence as you deploy. Now, from your gap map, which use cases are within reach and which are not. So the final step is picking where to start. And I call that a beachhead. The term comes from military strategy. It is the first position you secure, not the most valuable ground, the first position that's achievable, the most achievable starting point that opens the path to everything else. In AI deployment terms, in this context, your beachhead is the use case you ship first. And that is not because it is the most ambitious, but it is because that one builds the foundation for every subsequent use case that stands on top of it. Selecting it requires two tests and both have to pass. Test one is the infrastructure gap is small, right? So your current scores are close to what it is, what this use case requires across these dimensions. So you're not funding a major platform overhaul before a single agent runs. So the infrastructure gap should be small. Test two is it should have standalone, measurable business value. This use case should justify its own budget line without pointing to what it enables later. It has to have some reduced processing time, quantifiable error reduction, something with a number attached to it. It has to have some business value. If it only passes test one, it is justification that it builds towards the use case you really want. So think about it. If it just passes test one, which is passing the infrastructure gap test, and if the justification is that it builds toward the use case you really want, you are asking someone to fund infrastructure work with a use case label on it. And that conversation is harder. That's not going to pass, right? So you have to find this intersection where the infrastructure gap is small, so you can build something without a major overhaul in infrastructure, but then it also has its own business value. Now let me make this concrete with an example. A low modification agent is the right ambition for a retail bank. The agent handles the full workflow, retrieves account data, assesses options, negotiates within defined parameters, updates the system, triggers the compliance documentation. No human workers needed in the loop, right? Well, most of the time, right? But that use case needs level 3 across 5 dimensions. If you are currently at level 1 on data access and level 1 on observability, that is a significant infrastructure program before that agent runs. Meanwhile, you might have a transaction enrichment use case on the list. It would classify transactions, add merchant context, improve data quality. That only needs level 2 on most dimensions. Your current infrastructure is close. It's like it needs 4 to 6 weeks of focused work. And it has a standalone case. You would have cleaner transaction data. It reduces downstream error rates and feeds every subsequent use case. That is your beachhead. You have to ship that. You now have a working data pipeline, a testing observability layer, and a schema enforcement pattern, all of which the loan modification agent also needs. You did not delay the ambition, you found the fastest path to it. So to summarize, the method is 3 main steps if you think about it. Score your infrastructure across the 8 dimensions, honest scores, not aspirational ones. Map your use cases against the required levels to produce a gap analysis. Then select your beachhead using both criteria, small infrastructure gap, standalone value. That's it. No workshops, no prioritization matrices, no voting on what business wants most. The infrastructure tells you with data what is achievable, and the business tells you what is valuable. The intersection is where you start. The one thing I want you to take away from this is that the gap between where your infrastructure is and where your use cases need it to be is measurable. It is not a vague concern about readiness. It is a number per dimension. per use case. And once you have that number, you have a decision rather than a debate. So I have put an example template of the framework. It's referenced in the description of the video. I have got a newsletter called Agent Build. I will link that in the video as description as well. You can subscribe to it. I talk about production AI insights, if you like, every week. And if you're running this assessment in your organization, drop a comment. I want to hear where you are getting stuck, what feedback you have got, how you think we could improve it. I'm Sandy. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.